I'm with James Bennett today, and he is from Ask Pathfinder. And welcome, James.
Hi, Joe.
And he is a part of our SME series, giving us some insights, I guess, from SME owners who also work with SMEs or that have worked with corporates in the past, to give us a sense of, well, hopefully a bit of inspiration, a bit of hope, but also some top tips, which is a phrase I hate, but it's so relevant to what I see. Some insights, if you like, some insights into their wisdom based on their experience. James is a sales professional. James, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? How long have you been in sales? What got you into sales? And what do you love about sales?
Thanks. Okay, Joe, thanks. Yeah, trained as a zoologist, in fact, at university, hardly the...
Of course you did. the natural progression to sales.
Natural progression. In fact, though, as it turned out, the area that I particularly enjoyed was behavioural zoology. I did specialised in zoology. And although we might try and deny it, human behaviour and animal behaviour are not really terribly different. We forget this with our social structures and so forth. But came out of university, started my own decorating business, in actual fact. Realised after a couple of years that at the tender age of 20-something, I really knew nothing about how to set up a business, how to scale a business. It was going fantastically well, but I didn't really know what to do with it. Turned to somebody who made me realise, coached me effectively, made me realise that the bit that I most enjoyed about my business was selling it. And that maybe I had a penchant for selling. So that's exactly what I did. I went and got what many people would call a proper job, entered the world of sales, and that was 35 or something years ago. So from that point onwards, it's always been in business-to-business sales, although I happen to believe that business-to-business sales and business-to-consumer sales are to a certain extent the same, because it's always person to person. Business to business is just a little more complicated because there are more people to sell to, typically, in a business in order to get to a final decision. So over the course of the years, I've been fortunate enough to work for some amazing companies, some small, some SMEs themselves, some absolutely vast. The largest I worked for was a company called Oracle. And because I've worked for very large corporates, I have had the blessing of a vast amount of formal training in selling, in leadership, in management. I think I tallied it up and it came to sort of over 150,000 quid's worth of formal training and coaching. So my real purpose now is to bring the benefit of all of that training and experience and coaching, combined with using it on the ground personally, and using it on the ground coaching salespeople who've reported to me as a sales leader over the years. So I take vast amounts, scale it down, simplify it, and then help people make use of it in their own business in a much more, much simpler, faster, quicker, more digestible fashion.
It sounds very similar to what we do, because we worked in the big businesses and the big law firms, and then actually taking what we do at that level and bringing it down to a smaller level. It takes a lot of work to do that, because the simplification is tough, but it means that it's available with economies of scale for the small business. So that's what you do now. So you've got experience in corporate. How do you think things are different between the corporate world and the SME world in light of sales? How are things different?
I would say the biggest difference is that in selling to corporates and in corporate, although many people might not admit it, no one's really dealing with their own money until you get to shareholders.
Yes.
In SMEs, it's much more personal. I know, there's the oldest saying in the book, which is it's not personal, it's business. But in SMEs, You know, the large majority of cases, these are family firms. These are not PLC listed. They're not NASDAQ AIM listed companies. They're simply businesses that are personally owned and family owned. And therefore the sense of risks that people want to take, the willingness that people want to take those risks, and the way people go about assessing them are necessarily very different.
Yeah.
And therefore the ways in which people go about buying from an SME perspective are very different. In some cases, when I was working at Sage, there was quite a well-known phrase that would be a test in qualifying a potential deal, which is simply, is the business owner or the majority shareholder more interested in buying this piece of software, making this change to the business, or would they rather spend it on a new Range Rover?
So if they wanted to spend it on the new Range Rover, then it would not be, you would...
Then your deal would go south, and that would be the end of that. Yeah, quite simply.
That's a good test. That's a great test. Yeah, it's like, yeah, this probably is not going to go forward, right?
You just have to get real. You just have to get real. When people are spending effectively their own money in a business, in many ways, one's art of selling needs to be that much better.
Yeah.
Because you're literally convincing people to part with their own cash.
With their own cash, which when it's business to business, it's somebody else's money. It's part of a budget. When it's part of a budget, it's a lot easier, and there's a lack of, yeah. And even if they're being held to account to that budget, it's a lot less personal. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Then it becomes a different matter, which is the achievement of their objectives within the corporate environment.
Yeah. And there were a few things that you were mentioning in the SME world. Well, there was something that I know I've used, and I've looked at the spin selling system that you said you've kind of adapted for your own purposes, or did you adapt it for the SME world, or did you adapt it when you were in corporate for the corporate world, but it just happens to work for the SME world?
Gosh, when did I adapt it? That's I was conscious of adapting it about a year ago when I came out of corporate employment and set up Ask Pathfinder. And that was all part of my own process of taking rafts, thousands of hours of training and converting them into really usable things. Because at that point, I blended a number of different techniques and acronyms and methodologies in a different kind of way. So one of the things that really, as I interviewed a lot of people as I started up this business, I started looking at why people really buy, and particularly SMEs. Why would people really buy? And I concluded that there were two fundamental reasons. One was to achieve aspirations. This is, and this, again, this goes to us all as individuals when we buy as consumers to a large extent as well. So achieving aspirations in a business context might be making more money. It might be saving money. It might be achieving business goals in this SME business. Those are highly motivational reasons to invest in something which will help you achieve those things.
Yes.
That's number one.
Yes.
Number two, however, and not to be overlooked, and especially relevant right now, is making investments to avoid or mitigate risks. Sorry, that's not a COVID cough, that's a vague. So there are those two things. The real focus for people to buy will be mitigating or averting risks and achieving aspirations.
So it's the pleasure-pain principle, isn't it, really? It's
it is.
Towards the pleasure and coming away from the pain. Yeah.
I like that. I can feel a blog or a post coming on that one. Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome.
The spin, which I was taught 20 or so years ago, is generally viewed to stand for, in terms of questioning technique, identify the situation, the S. The P of spin is usually referred to as problem. So identify the problems that people need to overcome. Then go on with one's questioning to understand the implications of those problems. And then determine the N, the need, right? You've done it. The problem with just having problems is that, strangely enough, psychologically, people aren't particularly motivated to fix problems, just to fix problems.
Yeah.
People will fix problems in order to avert or mitigate risks and in order to achieve their aspirations. So that's why I did a little bit of a twist, and this is how I coach it. Instead of just thinking situation, problem, implication, need, always remember that in the implication questions, one is looking to find the risks that need to be averted or mitigated. And in the implication questions, find out what the aspirations are that people wish to achieve. So you can either turn spin into sprain, or indeed, you could turn it into aspirin.
Love that. Aspirin. You reminded me of my Scrabble game that I've got mildly addicted to during this. You see at the bottom, you're like, oh, I can, that might, yeah, but it won't go anywhere, right? Aspirin or sprain, great, yes. And see, I've done spin selling before. I'm no good at it. I mean, if I were to, and I've no idea, I'm sure there are psychological profiles, but being a lawyer, kind of risk aversion, I'm very process driven. So I love things like spin process because it gives you a process. But actually it's very people driven, I think, the spin process, isn't it? It's all about people and really connecting to people.
Yes.
Not so much my skill. I'm also not a trained salesperson. So, but using the spin process definitely helps to dig into where, not just what the problem is, because people always talk about what's the problem that you're looking to solve, but actually then the implications, and therefore what it is they need in order to solve that implication. You were talking when we spoke initially, you said, and there's kind of some businesses that are going to be doing really well right now, not because of the spin method or the spray method, but because of, was it VICT? You said something about volatility,
VUCA.
Uncertainty.
Yeah, VUCA, V-U-C-A, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity.
Right, so what does that mean in an environment like this?
Well, the reason VUCA was originally established was especially for leaders of businesses.
Yes.
For them to have something to try and put some context, put some structure around a general feeling maybe of just being out of control, things not quite going according to plan, if indeed the plan was sound. So the idea behind VUCA is, first of all, to grasp what is it that's volatile, what is it that's uncertain, what is it that's ambiguous, and what is it that is complex. It's like many of these methods, these techniques, a lot of it comes down to understanding the situation in the first place. It's why before I ever go into any sales coaching, my first thing will be to get salespeople and sales leaders to do a self-assessment of their skills and mindset before we try and do anything to achieve anything. It's important first to measure, because then we've got something that we can try and do something with. And that's why traditional resolutions to VUCA are then to be able to establish a new vision, to understand a better way to communicate, and so forth. So that's particularly now, we're in a situation where pretty much almost everybody is in the kind of mother of all VUCAs. If
that's what you call it, I call it something else, but yeah, VUCA.
Well,
good name.
Yeah, we'll give it an official term.
Yeah.
And the idea behind just 4 letters, like 4 letters of spin, is to be able to look at it and get to understand it, to give it some thought in a structured fashion, and then quite simply, in order to come up with ideas to address each.
Mm. So I don't know whether you know much about it. I know it's something that you've mentioned. I don't know if it's a kind of philosophy that you ascribe to and that you go into in depth, but there's a lot of volatility at the moment. There's a lot of uncertainty. But I guess the question, what you're saying is, it's not just saying, oh, there's volatility, there's uncertainty, there's complexity and ambiguity. It's saying, what is it about this particularly that is volatile? What is it particularly that is uncertain?
Yes.
And going through that so the aim of the VUCA context, I don't know what it is. What is it?
It's just an acronym, really.
It's an acronym.
Yeah.
The point of the acronym is just to get to the point where we can work out what it is we need to do as business owners.
Yeah.
In a particular situation.
In fact, I came across VUCA very recently. I came across it from a client of mine called 3GHR. They specialize in leadership and management development.
Right.
And they provide coaching and training and all sorts of support and help to business leaders. Part of it is, part of the context of that is those who are particularly suffering, enjoying, experiencing what other things one might think of VUCA.
Yeah.
And
I imagine they're doing quite well right now.
they are seeing quite a lot of demand, and there you go. And back to your first point, there are some businesses who are in a position to thrive because of the VUCA of today's situation. Others need, for traditional trading, a more settled, continuous, steady state of an economy in people's lives.
Yeah.
So it's kind of horses for courses, and right now, of course, it's about making sure that we, if we are immediately dealing and helping people with the situation they are facing because of the pandemic, and we have solutions to that right now, then great, we're in a great spot already. But if we are more the kind of business that operates under what we used to think of as normal trading conditions, then the reality is, frankly, we probably need to forget a few of the sacred cows and have a rethink, unless we're just going to mothball for something that we think is going to be normal and returning sometime in the short future.
Sometime when?
Yeah, quite. When is that going to be exactly?
Yeah.
We don't know, and that's all part of the uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
So for a lot, it's think of VUCA now, deal with what it is now, in order to come up with some pretty tough questioning of oneself and one's business, in order to try and establish relevance for people now.
And that takes you back then to the spin selling, because I think a lot of the problems and the not the implementation. What is the the implications,
yeah.
And therefore the needs are going to be driven by the specific circumstances. So
absolutely,
it's worthwhile doing this process. I definitely, after our conversation, sat down and thought, okay, what are we doing? How are we doing it? Because it's very easy to just say, what is the problem right now? But actually there's deeper conversation that needs to be had.
Yeah.
From a business perspective. The final thing I just wanted to talk about was a comment that you made when we last spoke, and this was relating to problems. And you said that many of us, I'm one of those people that looks to people that have gone before, and I look up to the likes of Steve Jobs and Richard Branson, and I'm like, at one time I'll be there. And you kind of warned against, it wasn't you warning against, being inspired by people, but there was something you warned against. Do you want to share a little bit more about that?
Yes, and nice segue, in fact, because when one talks about addressing VUCA today, if your service or solution is more geared to steady state, then need to rethink relevance. And it's very tempting. I mean, let's face it, we see it time and time again. Somebody probably absolutely brilliant, comes up with a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
And
maybe.
and yeah, may convince some others to put some money into it, may not, but we'll go piling ahead with a brilliant idea, absolutely clear on the brilliant idea, and some kind of epiphany that the market ought to understand. And yeah, if you're Steve Jobs, with pretty much a limitless checkbook because he was a billionaire already, or you're Richard Branson, coming up with space tourism, that's great. But that's not, in Richard Branson's case, of course, that's not where he started. We see Richard Branson now with some amazing ideas and a bottomless pot of funds, but he simply started with where, honestly, most businesses need to start, which is to properly understand the problem that people need fixing. What are the problems that people need fixing? If one's providing a business-to-business service, what risks does it avert or mitigate? And what aspirations does it help your buyers achieve? But because without that sequence of problems, risks, and aspirations, you might just have a crazy, brilliant idea. It might be as good as the iPhone when Jobs first came up with it. But the reality is that the amount of money you have to pump into a brilliant idea without a problem connection is vast, absolutely vast.
I assume that's human psychology, because we need to see a problem to fix in order for that to be a relevant purchase. I mean, I assume that's why.
In most cases, that is absolutely it, because people won't understand. The psychology of humans is that we, particularly in adult world, where we are honestly less open, what we do when we try and understand something as adults is we compare it to what we already know. It's very different to the way children see the world. They're just sponges. They have very little experience, so they don't have pigeonholes to put things in. They just accept it, take it, that's it. In adult world, however, we can't help it. 90% of the population are always trying to put something into a pigeonhole. Yeah. And fundamentally, those are problem pigeonholes. Yeah. What problem is this helping me fix so that I can avert risk, so that I can achieve aspirations? So the important thing where it comes to relevance is fundamentally in marketing and selling to be able to help people put you in a pigeonhole, just put you into that pigeonhole to be more effective than anybody else in the pigeonhole.
Fabulous. James, thanks so much. I got several things from there, but the top things that are coming to my mind as a small business right now are work out the problems, go back and do the work around the relevance based on the specific circumstances that we're in right now. If you're in a traditional business, then work out how things can be shifted if they can't, okay, but see what can be done. And all of these are timeless philosophies. I don't want to use the word philosophy because they're tools. They're all tools that have worked way before, they work now, and will work way into the future. And that's why they're so successful. So thank you. How can people get in contact with you if they want to connect with you from a business perspective, to learn from your sales technique, to get your wisdom from years of working with the corporate world?
Gosh, wisdom. Thank you very much for that. a few I don't know, do we call them hacks these days? It's very simple to get hold of me. I have a website with information stories on there, which is askpathfinder.co.uk.
Right.
If anybody wants to email me, that would be great. I'm simply james.bennett with 2 N's and 2 T's at askpathfinder.co.uk. And
you can probably connect on LinkedIn that way as well, right?
There's certainly LinkedIn, yes. Yeah.
Which is how we met. James, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today. I hope that those of you that have watched have gained some wisdom around sales technique from the top corporates, down at the SME level. And yeah, we'll look forward to seeing you soon. James, you're gonna stick around and do a personal interview as well. Thank you so much.
That's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, Joe.
You're welcome. All right. Can't stop it though. Here we go.